If you've never watched someone casually destroy your life while buttering a dinner roll, I envy you. My name's Halden. Not Hal, not Henry, Halden. People always mess it up, but she never did. That's how it started. Actually, she said my name right when nobody else ever had, and somehow that felt like enough. But that night, the one I keep replaying, she said something I can't forget, and I honestly don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for just sitting there long enough to hear it. It was supposed to be dinner. Just dinner. With her family. Again. We'd driven 5 hours to her mother's place in Glen Harbor, a small, sleepy town wrapped in fog and full of people who still call Facebook the Facebook. Her family was predictable in all the ways mine never was. Polite, reserved, careful with their words. So when she laughed, not just laughed, but really laughed, like she had a secret burning in her chest, everyone turned. Then she said it. And I stood up. And I left. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is, I knew something was coming. Weeks before. Maybe months. I just didn't want to believe it. Or maybe I did. Maybe I needed a reason to finally walk out of a house I had been calling home, even though it hadn't felt like one in years. You want to know what she said, right? I'll get there. But first, let me tell you what happened in the weeks leading up to that night. Because if you've ever felt like your reality was melting one silent day at a time, this part might sound a little too familiar. There's a silence people don't talk about, the kind that doesn't arrive with shouting or slam doors, but slips between two people like fog, quiet, and choking. That's what our marriage became. And looking back, I think the silence was screaming long before I ever heard it. It started with little things, the kind you tell yourself don't matter. She stopped texting me the way she used to. I'd send her something funny, and instead of her usual 3 laughing emojis in a, "You're ridiculous," I'd get a thumbs up. Or nothing. And when I pointed it out, she'd smile like I was making too much of it. "You overanalyze everything," she said once, brushing past me on her way to the laundry room. But I wasn't overanalyzing. I was noticing. And I think I've always been cursed with noticing the wrong things too clearly and the right things too late. Her name was Brea. Not Brenda. Not Brittany. Brea. She was smart, organized, sarcastic, and always 2 steps ahead of me in a conversation. For a long time, that was what I loved most. But somewhere along the way, it became what she used to keep me off balance. Every question I asked, she had an answer for. Every doubt I voiced, she turned into a joke. And every time I got that sinking feeling in my gut, she handed me a smile like a tranquilizer. And I took it. A month before that dinner, I found a receipt in her coat pocket. It was folded 4 times and smelled faintly like the vanilla body spray she used to pretend she didn't wear. It was from a boutique hotel an hour outside our city, one we'd never stayed at together. The date on the slip was a Tuesday, 2 weeks prior, a night she'd told me she had a late work meeting and would be staying with her friend Allison to avoid the drive. I held on to that receipt for 3 days before I asked her about it. When I did, she looked at me like I was insane. "Seriously, Halden? That's from Allison's surprise birthday. I told you about that." She hadn't. "You just forgot," she added before I could respond. Then she kissed my cheek and walked off like we hadn't just rewound and erased the truth. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I had just forgotten. But I hadn't. I started keeping notes after that. I know that sounds pathetic, but I didn't trust myself anymore. Every time she left the house, every time her tone shifted, every moment that felt off, I wrote it down in a note on my phone labeled grocery list, like if I disguised my doubt as errands, it would hurt less. There were patterns I didn't want to see. Her weekend trips to clear her head. The way she started double-checking if I'd be home before bringing in the mail. The late-night texts from contacts saved under initials JD, RB, KC. I convinced myself they were coworkers. But then, one night, I saw a notification pop up while she was in the shower. "Missed last night already. Let's plan the next escape." It was from KC. I should have confronted her. I should have walked in, held up the phone, and demanded an explanation. But instead, I turned off the screen and put the phone back where I found it. I went downstairs, made coffee, watched the steam rise and asked myself how it had come to this. Me, sneaking around my own house, terrified of finding what I already knew. When I tried to bring it up the next day, I froze. We were driving. She was humming along to the radio, something old and soft, and I opened my mouth and said instead, "Do you ever think about getting a dog?" She laughed. "Only if it comes house-trained and emotionally stable." We didn't speak the rest of the ride. It was like that for weeks, moments where I nearly said the truth out loud, only to pull back, afraid of what might happen if she confirmed what I already suspected. I think a part of me believed that as long as I didn't hear her say it, I could still believe the version of her I had built in my head, the one who looked me in the eye on our wedding day and promised forever. But forever isn't a promise. It's a gamble, and the odds were shifting fast. I still hadn't told anyone. Not my brother, not my coworker who always asked about Brea with a smile, not even my therapist, who I had stopped seeing months earlier because I was tired of being asked. And how did that make you feel? It made me feel like I was losing a war I never agreed to fight. And then came the dinner. Her mother called the week before and insisted. "It's been too long since we saw you two. You were still a unit, right?" She joked, half laughing. Brea was already nodding before I answered. And so I said yes. And we packed our bags. And I sat in the car next to a woman I didn't recognize anymore, driving toward a house full of people who thought we were happy. But I wasn't ready for what she would say that night. Not at all. The day we left for Glenharba, it rained for 4 hours straight. Not the kind of rain you wait out, the kind that smears across the windshield no matter how fast the wipers move, soaking into everything, making the sky feel like it's pressing down on you. I remember watching Brea's hands on the steering wheel as we pulled out of our driveway. She always drove when we visited her parents. Said I was too slow, too careful. That day, I let her. I didn't have the energy to argue. We didn't speak much during the drive. I had a playlist on, something soft and instrumental, the kind of thing you play when you want to fill the silence without breaking it. I glanced at her a few times. Her face was blank, focused, like a pilot navigating through a storm. At one point, I reached over and touched her wrist, just for a second, and she didn't pull away. But she didn't look at me either. Her fingers just tightened on the wheel, and I let my hand fall back to my lap. About halfway there, we stopped for gas. I went inside to grab us something bottled water, trail mix, a pack of gum she used to like. I hesitated before picking it up. I didn't know if she still chewed it. I didn't know if she still liked mint. I didn't know anything anymore, and that scared me more than I could admit. When I got back to the car, she was texting. She tilted the screen slightly when she saw me coming, just enough to make it look accidental. But I noticed. I always noticed. "Who's that?" I asked, casual. Too casual. "Allison," she said, not missing a beat. "She's asking what dress I'm wearing tonight. Mom probably told her." I nodded, but my gut twisted. Allison didn't care about dresses. I'd met her enough times to know she barely remembered what day of the week it was, let alone what people were wearing. The gum stayed unopened in the cup holder. We arrived at the lake house just after 6. The sky was dark, the porch light already on. Her mom opened the door before we even knocked, arms wide like a sitcom grandma, wrapping Brea in a hug and pulling me in next. Her dad was in the kitchen, humming to himself and burning something on the stove. Their house always smelled like cinnamon and firewood. It was comforting in the way old books are, full of memories that don't belong to you. Brea slipped easily into her daughter role. She laughed at the right moments, complimented her mother's earrings, offered to set the table before anyone asked. Watching her was like watching an actress in a film I didn't audition for. I was there, but not really. Present, but invisible. Dinner was loud, wine pouring, stories flying across the table like ping-pong balls. Everyone was in good spirits. Her Uncle Chet cracked jokes that made her aunt roll her eyes, and her little cousin kept asking when dessert was coming. I smiled, nodded, played the part. But the whole time, I kept glancing at Brea. She was glowing. Not because she was happy, no, this was something else. She was in control, and I think she knew it. At one point, her father raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said. "And to Brea and Halden, 5 years and still going strong." Everyone clapped politely. I nodded and lifted my glass. Brea leaned closer and whispered, "Still going strong, huh?" Her voice had that edge again. That tone I learned to dread. It was the sound of someone enjoying a private joke, when I hadn't been let in on. After dessert, her mom's famous lemon pie, we all lingered at the table. Coffee came out. Brea sat back in her chair, swirling her spoon in her cup like she was waiting for the perfect moment. I watched her mouth curl into a faint smile. That's when she said it. The phrase. The one that didn't need to be loud, or cruel, or vulgar. The one that didn't shout. Just whispered. "You know, sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I picked someone a little less safe." There was a pause, not long, but enough. Just long enough for every pair of eyes at the table to flick toward me, then away. Someone chuckled, probably her cousin, thinking it was harmless. Her dad laughed nervously. "Brea," he said, shaking his head like she was being silly. But I saw her eyes. They didn't move from mine. She wanted me to hear it. She wanted me to feel it. And I did. It hit like cold water. Not because of the words themselves, people say thoughtless things all the time, but because of what they meant coming from her, at that table, in front of those people. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a declaration. And for the first time in our 5 years of marriage, I felt truly, irreversibly done. I stood up slowly. No drama. No shouting. Just the sound of my chair scraping back against the hardwood floor. Brea's smile faded just a little. "Where are you going?" her mom asked, blinking. I didn't answer. I walked past the kitchen, down the hallway, grabbed my coat from the rack, and stepped out into the cold air. The rain had stopped. The silence felt cleaner outside. And I kept walking. No one followed. Not then. Not for a long time. The cold hit me like it had been waiting. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, the kind that sobers you, anchors you. My shoes crunched against the gravel path leading down to the lake. I didn't know where I was going. Not really. I didn't have my wallet, or a plan, or even a full tank of emotional energy. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not after that. Not after her voice sliced through 5 years of struggle and pretending with a single, casual cruelty. I walked past their old shed, where Brea's father kept his fishing gear. I walked past the row of trim bushes her mother bathed like children. I walked until the house disappeared behind trees, until all I could hear were the faint lapping waves and the wind threading through the pine branches. I sat down on a bench by the water. The wood was damp. I didn't care. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the way the moon lit up the ripples, like the lake was breathing. My hands were shaking. I think I expected her to come after me. Or maybe hoped she would. Just once. Just this one time, let her be the one to chase me. To ask. To care. But she didn't. And deep down, I think I knew she wouldn't. Because she had been leaving me in small pieces for months, this was just the first time I chose to leave first. I kept replaying it in my head. Someone a little less safe. What did that even mean? Safe? Was it because I wasn't a risk? Because I didn't cheat? Didn't lie? Was it because I showed up every day, even when she stopped meeting me halfway? Brea used to call me dependable like it was a compliment. Now it felt like an insult wearing a polite coat. I must have sat there for over an hour before I stood up and walked to the edge of the water. I took out my phone and stared at it for a while. Notifications from a group chat. A missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Nothing from her. I opened our shared photo album. It was still their HMB adventures. We used to add to it every trip we took. Camping in Oregon. The weekend in Sedona. That road trip to Big Sur where the car broke down and we laughed until we fell asleep in the back seat. I scrolled through those memories like a man looking at someone else's life. Because none of that felt real anymore. I started writing a message. Just one sentence. You didn't have to say it like that. I didn't send it. I deleted it. Then typed a new one. I wanted to be enough for you. I really did. Deleted. I locked the phone and slid it into my pocket. That's when I realized I didn't want to go back to that house. Not tonight. Not ever. I wasn't going to sleep on the edge of the bed again while she texted someone else in the bathroom. I wasn't going to wake up pretending the silence between us wasn't screaming. I walked along the road until I hit the town limits. A diner with flickering neon was still open, its windows fogged with the warmth of late-night conversations and overcooked fries. I stepped inside. The place smelled like burned coffee and old linoleum. A woman behind the counter raised her eyebrows. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said. I sat down on the far stool. "Worse," I muttered. She poured me a cup without asking. I drank it black even though I hated it that way. An old man sat 2 booths over, scribbling something in a notebook. A couple whispered in a corner, too wrapped up in each other to notice anything else. The world hadn't stopped just because mine had. I stayed until close. I booked a motel room down the road with my phone. One night, I told myself. Just a night to breathe. But morning came, and I didn't want to go back. So I didn't. I texted her at noon. I left my ring on the nightstand. "I think you'll be happier without me holding you back." No response. An hour later, I turned off my location sharing. That evening, I deleted our shared calendar. Then the photo album. Then her number. I didn't block her. Blocking felt angry. And I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. And that's the part people don't understand. Leaving isn't always about hate. Sometimes it's just about stopping the slow bleed of your own self-worth. I called my brother from the motel. Told him I needed a place to crash. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "I'll send you the address." I took the bus the next day, wearing the same clothes from dinner. Nobody from her family ever reached out, and she never called. Not once. That silence? It told me everything I needed to know. There's something eerie about sleeping in a room that smells nothing like your life. The motel walls were paper-thin, the air stale, the blanket scratchy with static from overwashing. And still, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because it was peaceful, far from it, but because I no longer had to pretend. That first morning I woke up on the road felt like coming out of a fog. My body was sore, my throat dry, my mind still half clinging to a version of life where Brea might call, might text, might say something that would explain it all, or at least acknowledge the hollow space that used to be us. She didn't. I lay there for a long time, staring at the motel ceiling fan rotating too slow to be useful. It squeaked on every third turn. I counted the squeaks instead of checking my phone, because checking meant hoping, and hoping meant waiting, and I had finally decided, maybe for the first time, that I was done waiting for someone who had already made up their mind. I walked to a local thrift store that afternoon, just to kill time. Bought a hoodie for $6.75 and a book about the psychology of silence that I never ended up reading. The woman behind the counter asked if I wanted a receipt. I told her no. I didn't need proof I'd been there. Over the next few days, I drifted, like someone skipping over the surface of his own life. I moved in with my older brother, Dorian, in a small town about 3 hours away. He lived alone in a fixer-upper that smelled faintly of sawdust and regret. His fridge was always empty. His couch was too short. And somehow, it was perfect. Because he didn't ask me to talk. He just handed me a beer that first night, nodded toward the backyard, and let me be. I knew something was off with her, he finally said 2 nights in. We were watching an old Western with the sound too low, and the subtitles lagging behind. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. He shrugged. Because people don't listen when they're in it. You only hear what you're ready for. That stuck with me. I wasn't ready. Not until she said those words at the dinner table like I was a pair of shoes she'd outgrown. I thought of all the signs I'd buried, the missing hours, the strange absences, the way she touched her phone more than she touched me. I thought of that moment she laughed before she spoke. The laughter was worse than the words. I got a job at a hardware store the next week. Nothing fancy. Minimum wage, dusty shelves, the occasional elderly customer asking if I could help them find something they already knew they didn't need. It felt good to be useful, even if just in small, quiet ways. I stopped introducing myself as Halden, married to Brea. I was just Halden now. It felt strange, like forgetting to wear a ring you wore so long the skin beneath it turned pale. She still hadn't reached out. No apology. No, I didn't mean it like that. No, I was hurting. Nothing. At night, I walked through Dorian's neighborhood, a grid of homes with chain-link fences and dying porch lights. I'd watch couples on porches arguing softly or laughing too loud. I'd pass teenagers sitting on curbs staring at their phones, playing songs I didn't recognize. I wasn't part of any of it. I was a shadow passing through. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind being unseen. About 2 weeks in, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo, me and Brea, smiling at that Big Sur gas station, her arms around my shoulders, mine around her waist. We both looked sunburned and happy and a little unprepared for whatever the future held. On the back, written in pen, was one sentence. You always were the safer choice. That was it. No signature. Just that. I stared at that photo for a long time. The version of her in that picture didn't exist anymore. And maybe the version of me in that photo didn't either. I burned it in Dorian's backyard that night. I thought I might cry. I didn't. What I felt was emptier. But not in a bad way. Empty like a room after the furniture's gone. Nothing left to trip over. Nothing left to clean around. Just space. And the longer I sat with that space, the more I realized I could finally start filling it with things I chose. Books I wanted to read. Friends I hadn't called in years. Quiet mornings with coffee and no phone in sight. I still thought of her sometimes. Still caught myself wanting to tell her things, a movie I watched, a weird dream I had, a joke I knew she'd roll her eyes at. But those moments came less and less. And when they did, they didn't sting like they used to. I didn't need her to be the villain of my story. She didn't cheat with her body, maybe. But she walked out of our life long before I stood up from that table. She just waited for me to be the one to move first, so she wouldn't have to feel like the one who left. But we both know the truth. She was already gone. It had been 56 days since I walked out of that lake house and disappeared from her life. I hadn't counted them on purpose. The number just stuck in my head, probably because I wrote it in a note on my phone the night I moved into Dorian's spare room. Day 1. Breathing again hurts less than I expected. I hadn't thought about her for 2 full mornings. That felt like progress. The ache was still there, but it had become background noise, like a refrigerator hum you eventually stop noticing. I'd started putting things back together, small, fragile things. Cooking again. Reading again. Even picked up sketching, something I hadn't done since college. I didn't draw people anymore. Just lines. Abstract shapes. Things without names. Then the message came. I was closing the register at work when my phone buzzed. A number not saved. No name. No emoji. Just text. Can we talk? That's all it said. I stood there staring at the screen like it might burn through my palm. I knew it was her. Nobody else would text like that. No greeting. No context. No punctuation. Brea always spoke like she was mid-conversation, even when she wasn't. It made you lean in closer. That was her gift. Or her curse. I wasn't sure anymore. I didn't answer. Instead, I locked the phone, slipped it into my back pocket, and continued wiping down the counter like the message hadn't happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in Dorian's guest room while the wind tapped against the windows. She wanted to talk. Why now? What did she want from me? Was it guilt? Curiosity? Loneliness? Or had things gone wrong with whoever? And the worst part, the part one hated myself for, was that a tiny, almost broken part of me wanted to know. I didn't answer for 3 days. On the 4th, she sent another one. Please. Just a few minutes. Still no name. Still that tone. Soft, restrained, like she was dangling an apology just out of reach but couldn't bring herself to say the word. I didn't tell Dorian. He'd just shake his head and remind me of who she was now, not the woman in the road trip photos, but the one who said someone less safe while passing the mashed potatoes to her cousin. But I couldn't help it. I typed back 2 words. What for? She replied almost instantly. Like she'd been waiting, watching, hoping. I owe you an explanation. An explanation. As if anything she could say now would fill the space between what we had and what she dismantled with a single sentence. But still. I agreed. We met 2 days later. Neutral ground. A public park near the edge of the city, far enough from her world and mine. It was mid-afternoon, late spring. The sky was clean. Blue. Birds loud. Kids laughing on a nearby playground. The kind of day where nothing bad should happen. I got there first. She arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the same coat she wore the night of the dinner. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just looked at her. She looked different. Not in any big way. She still had the same brown hair pulled back into that same careless knot. Still wore the same tired boots she refused to replace. But something behind her eyes had shifted. The sharpness was gone. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping. And I wondered for a second, had this hurt her, too? Or was that just wishful thinking? Hi, she said softly. Hi. She sat beside me on the bench, careful not to let our shoulders touch. There was a long silence. The wind rustled the leaves. She cleared her throat twice before speaking. I didn't think you'd actually come. Neither did I. She nodded. Looked down at her hands. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Mine, of course, had been left behind weeks ago. She noticed where my hands rested and her lips tightened just slightly. I didn't mean it like that, she said. That sentence, the one I'd feared, expected, dreaded. I was angry, frustrated. I didn't know people would take it seriously. They didn't, I said. But I did. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her face wasn't smug. It wasn't cruel. It was small. Like someone who realized they'd built their house on someone else's foundation and had no idea how to fix the cracks. Things with us weren't perfect, she said. No, I replied, they weren't. But I never stopped loving you, she added. And that's when I felt something strange. Not rage. Not longing. But pity. Because I could see now that she believed it. Or at least wanted to. But love doesn't look like absence. It doesn't sound like laughter before a knife. It doesn't feel like being the safe option in someone else's risky life. You didn't love me, I said gently. You loved how I made your life easier. Quieter. You loved the way I filled space. She looked like I had slapped her. But she didn't deny it. She said, I didn't think you'd leave. I nodded. That's what you were counting on. We sat there for a while longer, not saying much. Just letting the wind speak. I'm not here to ask you to come back, she said eventually. I know that's gone. Then why did you come? She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, because I need to see what regret looks like when it's not mine. That broke something in me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She needed to feel it, to know she wasn't the only one grieving the wreckage. But I wasn't grieving anymore. I was healing. And healing looks like saying goodbye to the person who waited too long to tell the truth. I stood up. She stayed seated. "Take care of yourself, Brea," I said. And then I walked away again, this time not because I was hurt, but because I was finally whole. The strange thing about closure is that no one tells you how quiet it is. No applause. No dramatic storm rolling in. No credits. Just you, standing alone on a sidewalk after walking away from the person who once held the entire shape of your future, and realizing that the sky didn't fall. The world didn't stop. Your heart didn't burst. You just kept walking. And that's what I did after that final meeting with Brea. I walked 2 miles back to the bus station. I didn't look back. Didn't text her after. Didn't check if she messaged. She didn't. And I didn't care. Dorian picked me up that night with takeout containers in the passenger seat and a raised eyebrow that didn't need words. We didn't talk about what happened. He just handed me the bag and said, "They forgot your soy sauce." "You're welcome." We ate on the porch. Quiet. Crickets buzzing in the weeds. A neighbor's dog barking somewhere in the dark. It felt like the kind of night that wanted to be forgotten, the kind that just folded into memory without asking for a headline. But I didn't forget it. I don't think I ever will. Because something shifted in me that day. Not in a loud, triumphant way. More like a door closing softly behind you in a house you never felt at home in. And realizing you're free. Over the next few weeks, things changed in small, meaningful ways. I shaved my beard. Not because it looked bad. Brea actually liked it. But because it was hers, in a way. Something I'd started for her. Kept for her. I wanted to see my own face again. When I looked in the mirror afterward, it felt like meeting someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone gentler. Sadder. Wiser. I changed my phone number, too. Not out of spite. Just peace. The old one felt like it was tethered to an identity I didn't wear anymore. The version of me that tiptoed around questions and kept receipts in coat pockets like tiny truths. That man didn't exist now. Not really. And I started seeing someone. A therapist this time, not a woman. Her name was Dr. Marcy Truitt. She had gray streaks in her hair and a clock on the wall that ticked way too loudly. I told her everything. Not all at once, at first, just fragments. Sentences that trailed off. Silence I didn't know how to fill. But she didn't rush me. She just listened. One afternoon, I told her about the bench. About what Brea had said. About how I didn't yell. Didn't beg. Didn't fight. "Does that make you feel weak?" she asked gently. "No," I said after a pause. "It makes me feel done." She smiled. That's a different kind of strength. I didn't believe her at first. But over time, I started to understand what she meant. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to carry someone else's disappointment like it's your own. I started drawing again, really drawing. Faces this time. Not Brea's. Not mine. Just expressions. People I'd never met. Wrinkles and freckles and worry lines. It helped. My hands remembered things my heart had forgotten. That I could create. That I could express something I didn't have to explain. One night, I got invited to a small local art show. Nothing big. Just a friend of a friend who'd seen my sketches online and asked if I wanted to hang a few pieces in the corner of a converted bookstore. I almost said no. But something in me, maybe the version of Halden that was finally beginning to breathe, said yes. The night of the show, I wore a shirt I hadn't worn since college. Navy blue, soft, sleeves rolled up at the wrists. I caught my reflection in a storefront window on the way there and barely recognized myself. In the best way. People actually looked at my art. They nodded. They smiled. One woman even cried. Said a sketch reminded her of her father. I wanted to ask which one, but I didn't. I just stood there with her in the silence. And for a brief, fleeting second, I wasn't the guy who got left behind. I was the guy who left. Who chose peace. The next morning, something even stranger happened. I got an email from Allison. Not a text. Not a phone call. Just a short, 2-sentence email with the subject line, "You deserve to know." The message read. It wasn't just a sentence. She meant it. I didn't cover for her. I stayed quiet because I didn't know how to say it. "I'm sorry." That was it. No signature. No further context. I sat with that message for hours. Reread it 15 times. I didn't respond. What was the point? It didn't change anything. It didn't make the past cleaner. It didn't erase the nights I felt like furniture in my own marriage. But it did confirm what I already knew. There had been someone else. Maybe not physically, maybe not always, but emotionally, mentally, in the ways that mattered? Yes. And strangely, it didn't break me. It just proved I wasn't crazy, that my instincts weren't wrong, that all the tiny gut feelings I had, the texts, the awkward excuses, the nervous deflections, weren't paranoia. They were truth. And maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just to know that I hadn't been loving a ghost while the real version of her had drifted off somewhere else. The email went unanswered. But the next day, I sketched again. A woman sitting at a table, facing away from the viewer. Her head tilted just slightly, shoulders drawn in. A teacup untouched in front of her. Her posture didn't look sad, just resigned, like someone who knew she'd made her choice too late. I titled it, The Safer Choice. It's been almost a year since the dinner. 1 year since I stood up from that long, polished table surrounded by people who thought they knew us, and walked out without another word. Since then, I've lived more honestly, more quietly, and more fully than I ever did inside that marriage. Sometimes, I still get asked what happened. People from before. Mutual friends, old coworkers. I never tell them everything. I don't need to. I just say, we grew in different directions, and leave it there. Because what matters isn't how the world remembers our story. It's what I learned writing the ending myself. I moved into a small apartment above a bookstore. I painted the walls green. Not because green means anything to me, but because it didn't mean anything to us. That felt important. Making choices that weren't tied to a shared past. Just mine. I still work at the hardware store during the week, part-time now. But weekends? I teach a sketching class. It started with 3 students. Now there are 12. We sit in a circle with charcoal and paper and learn to see what most people miss. The curve of a frown, the way shadows shape a story. One woman once told me, "You don't teach drawing. You teach noticing." I took it as a compliment. Dorian finally started dating someone again. A woman named Val who drinks too much tea and insists on doing jigsaw puzzles before bed. I tease him for it. He pretends to hate it. I think it's the happiest he's looked in years. As for Brea, she never reached out again after that day in the park. I haven't seen her, haven't heard a whisper. And honestly, I hope she's doing okay. I don't wish her pain. I don't wish her regret. I just wish her the same thing I wished for myself. Peace. Because the real ending to our story isn't that she hurt me. It's that I healed. And healing doesn't look like shouting from rooftops. It looks like planting roots in a quiet life, in choices that are yours, in mornings that begin with peace instead of explanation. To anyone out there who's sitting across from someone who makes them feel small, ignored, unchosen, I hope you remember this. You are not someone's backup plan. You are not the safe option. You are not a placeholder for someone braver or bolder or louder. You are a story all your own, and walking away isn't the end of your worth. It's the beginning of your truth. I didn't get revenge. I didn't get closure the way I wanted it. I got something better. I got myself back. And some mornings, when I sip my coffee by the window and the sun breaks just right through the trees, I smile. Because I know I didn't just leave her behind. I found me, and I'm never going back.